I'm David Robertson, and this is another one of my blacksmithing educational videos, and today I will be showing you how to make an iron rose. I use 4 pieces, 3 are discs and 1 piece of quarter round steel, and I'll use the forge to flatten out the discs and a rounding hammer with the rounding face to actually do the work on the anvil. And then I'll use a torch to tweak the petals into position and change the shape. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let's get started. So I took 3 discs. These are 3 inches round and they are cut into 5 pie shapes with about 3/8 of an inch from the center hole. The lighting, you'll see the hole and the slits in various frames throughout the video. They're all the same, and I will be layering these on top of the quarter round bar to create the rose structure. First, after the cuts are made, and the cuts I did with a bandsaw, but you could do it with a hacksaw or a cold chisel, I'm cutting the corners off the petals with the cold chisel. And these are just small indentations, notches if you will. And I cut them cold. You could cut them hot as well, but on thin metal it really doesn't matter. The thickness is about 16 gauge, 18 gauge will work, 22 gauge will be a little bit thin, and you could go as thick as probably an 1/8 inch in the discs. Of course you will have to forge that out a bit more to create the thin petals. So all I'm doing is just cutting and breaking the corners off, and this creates the 5 pie shapes. You can see the notches cut in there, and it just rounds the petals off. Now using the rounding face of the hammer, which is a shallow convex curve, I am flattening and stretching out those petals. So the edge gets thinned down quite a bit and the center gets pulled out somewhat. The actual center of the disc doesn't get touched, so I'm only working on the petals. I do this on all 3 discs. To create a nice even stretch, an even form. Again, since the flower is an organic shape, these don't have to be stretched perfectly uniform in all directions. You're allowed some variation. Now I'm working on the quarter round bar to draw out a point on it, and then I'll do some texturing on it as it becomes the stem. In this video I'm not showing how to produce the sepals, they would just be the bottom layer in the rose. So I want to overlap the 3 layers of the petals. So the bottom notch goes over the top petal, so that they alternate all the way along. So you don't have a clear space through to the back. And this is what I'm showing here. And when all the space is filled in. Now I've welded the 3 layers on, 1 layer at a time from the top, and this was done with a MIG welder. If you're good with gas welding, you could do it with a gas welder as well. You could even braze them on. And then I'm using the torch and I'm prying up the inner layer of petals in a rotation motion. Now the left edge goes inside the right edge of the petals as you close them up. You can do it the other way around, but be consistent on all 3 layers. And this is the process that takes the time in making the rose, because you're actually sculpting it, if you will, just with the heat of the torch. I use needle nose pliers obviously to get in. And I'll keep bending that center disc, or it was a disc, into the petal shapes as I close it up quite tight, because I've got the two outer layers to follow. Now in this rose I use 3 layers. Certainly you could do it with 2, you could also do it with 4. You can also change your petals from 5 to 4. If you do this, it will change the shape of the rose and the complexity of it. I like the 5 petals for the degree of complexity. So this is a lot of heat and bend, heat and bend, heat and bend. The center disc, or the top disc, forms almost a bud shape when you start, because you want to close it quite tight. And again, you've overlapped the edges all around. And I keep tightening it and tightening it. I do the same on the second layer, and bring it up to the first, and I use the same overlap. For me, it's personal preference to have the left-hand corner tucked inside the right-hand corner. Now I've folded up the second layer, and I've been working on the third layer, and the same thing's happening. I'm trying to tuck everything in so it's nice and tight. I'm still bending to get the primary shape of the flower. When working with a torch, always be aware of where the flame is. It's very easy to be concentrating on the project and you end up slipping and cooking part of your hand or your glove or something like that. Always be aware where you're pointing that. So now I've completed the primary form of the flower with everything tucked up, and now I go back into the top edges, and if you look carefully, I'm just heating the top edge and then giving it a quick bend back, and this creates the ruffle on the top of the rose. And I do this on all of the petals all the way around. Takes a little bit of time, but I find this really adds a dramatic effect to the rose. It makes it look much more lifelike. And you keep working around and around, creating the shape. Now in this video I don't have time to discuss making the leaves for it, but simply they're forged and then electrically welded and ground and welded onto the stem. But this gives you the basic process for making the flower itself. You can see how the rose looks like a real rose, or a close representation of it now. So you're welcome to take a look on my website for newsletters and articles, and it's artistblacksmith.com.